Hello everyone! This week we're going to write a persuasive essay. So in this video we're going to look at some ways for you to use persuasion in your essay. Rhetoric can be described as the study of persuasion. And in rhetoric there are three main modes of persuasion. They are ethos, logos, and pathos. Let's take a look at each of these. The first is ethos, and ethos is the appeal to the credibility or authority of the author. It's the character, and it makes a big difference in persuading the viewer or the reader. So in writing, we have to use our style and how we present information to show our credibility. There's three main ways that you can establish your credibility. The first is if you're an expert. You will want to show your credentials. So you might do this by starting off by saying, as a teacher, I da-da-da. Or you could write your credentials on the title page or at the top of your writing. Another way is if you have a good reputation. In writing, a good reputation might come from being an established journalist, or writing in a well-known journal, or having scholarly reviews. But you could also just be a trusted person by continuously presenting only what you know to be true. Another way to show credibility is by using sources. So you can borrow information from people who are more credible and use their credibility in your article. The important thing is to give credit where credit is due and cite your sources. You can use quotes from famous people, you can show examples. Looks matter. But in writing, it's the use of fonts, style, format, those kind of things. Another way to increase ethos is by having a connection to the reader. People are more likely to trust people that are similar to themselves. Similarity establishes trust. So sharing similar experiences is one way to have a connection with your reader. Having a similar worldview is also important, so understanding your audience is quite important. The next mode of persuasion is logos. Logos is the appeal to logic, and logos is how you present data. But you're not just limited to presenting hard data, you can also use reason. Try to make a logical connection from your information to your conclusion. A good essay guides the reader and doesn't just present a fact after fact after fact. It's also a good idea to start with things that you know the reader will agree with and then move on to the more controversial topics. Reason also includes a value statement, and of course it's better if you share those same values. It's all about should. What should you do? Will the reader agree that this is what should happen in a given situation? Reason also makes use of a lot of if-then statements. Also with logos, it's important to have good organization. A well-organized, naturally flowing essay is much more persuasive and easier to follow than one that is just a mix of different arguments. Remember that we want to guide our reader to our conclusion, and in the end you should include a summary and conclusion to let the reader know what conclusions you came to and what conclusions they should make. The third mode of persuasion is pathos. A lot of words come from pathos: sympathy, empathy, pathetic, sympathetic, psychopath, sociopath. So pathos is the appeal to emotion. Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I think that that's the perfect summary of what pathos is. It's emotion. It is the most important of the three modes of persuasion. It's far more persuasive than logos or ethos. Pathos makes us want to get up and do something, to fight for justice, to do a call to action. In pathos, we can make an appeal to group identity. If you want to be part of our group, you should also have these qualities. So you want to make your reader feel included if they agree with you. Peer pressure is also part of pathos. So if in your essay you can show that everyone agrees with your opinion, or the reader thinks that everyone agrees with your opinion, they are more likely to also agree with that opinion. People are also quite likely to follow a leader. One of the most important ways that you can use pathos in your essay is by using anecdotes. Now, anecdote is a short, real story based on real people or experiences from your life, and they're quite convincing to your reader. So stories, anecdotes, even if they're not representative of the majority, are very persuasive. It has been said that what makes us different from other animals is our storytelling. Be sure that your anecdotes are related to the material, or you can draw a conclusion based on it. Word choice is also very important. A good example of this is using incompetent versus stupid. The meaning that we attach to words is based on our experiences with that word. The word stupid has a very deep connection as it was used when we were young. It made us feel really bad. So there's a very strong emotional attachment to that word, whereas using the word incompetent doesn't have that same emotional attachment. So your word choice can have an effect on the emotion of your reader, and as we've already seen, emotion is the most convincing of the modes of persuasion. Cognitive fluency should also be considered. Cognitive fluency is how easy it is to read what you're writing. Short, simple sentences are easier to understand, and it's been shown that if a reader is better able to understand what is being presented, they're more likely to agree with it. But the use of longer and more complicated sentences and words is also important. Bigger words are usually more precise. The larger your vocabulary, the more specific word you can use to illustrate your point. Longer words are also more descriptive. Using higher level language gives the impression that you are maybe smarter or have more authority on the subject, which is also a way to convince someone of your argument. People are more likely to trust someone that they think is smart. There are also a number of rhetorical devices. Today we're just going to look at a few of them, but I think they're most effective as a means of pathos, although they do also include elements of ethos and logos. The most useful of these is metaphor. On average, native speakers use 6 metaphors a minute. There are frozen metaphors and novel metaphors. So a frozen metaphor is something that's well established in English, whereas a novel metaphor is something new that that person has come up with. Metaphors build imagery. They're more descriptive, they help the reader visualize your arguments, and they help to build the story. They also add meaning to your sentence. Metaphors also draw comparisons. For example, is he a knight in shining armor, or is he a dirty rat? Comparing someone to a knight, a noble person, is a lot different than comparing someone to a rat. It's because the association that we have with knights is being chivalrous, brave, romantic, and rats, they carry the plague, they're dirty, they eat garbage, and using a metaphor, we can associate a person with that kind of animal. Similes are similar to metaphors, except that they use like or as. For example, someone could be as strong as an ox, clever as a fox, brave as a lion, or quiet as a mouse. Muhammad Ali said, "I float like a butterfly, I sting like a bee." Similes show you the comparison. Similar to this is personification. This is giving a non-human, human-like qualities. So for example, this chair doesn't have arms, but this table has legs. You can also say that an idea has legs, and that means it will last a long time. My new phone is a smart phone. So giving an animal or an object human-like qualities allows the reader to feel more sympathy for what you're talking about. Another rhetorical device is repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. This can be repeating the same thing over time, like a lot of advertising uses this. Another example of repetition is an isocolon. It's the repetition of words, symbols, letters, sounds, phonemes, and it sounds good to our ears. Alliteration is the repetition of a phoneme. For example, the car crashed, causing considerable damage. Anaphora is the repetition of the beginning of something, the beginning of a phrase, a clause, a sentence. A good example of this is Winston Churchill's "We will fight" speech. We will fight on the beaches. We will fight on the land. Epistrophe is the opposite of anaphora. It's the repetition of the end. Anadiplosis is when you repeat the end of something at the beginning of the next thing. In the Gladiator movie, Russell Crowe said, "The general who became a slave, the slave who became a gladiator, the gladiator who defied an emperor." The rule of three is also very important when it comes to persuasion. For some reason, humans like groups of three. It may be because it's the shortest way to make a list, it's the shortest way to establish a pattern, and humans are pattern-seeking animals. Three also gives us the sense of completeness. Use one for power, two for comparison, and three for completeness, wholeness, roundness. The most famous example, Vini, Vidi, Vici, by Julius Caesar, meaning I came, I saw, I conquered. But you'll also see the rule of three in Three Little Pigs, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Three Blind Mice, Three Wise Men. In real estate, the most important thing is location, location, location. Groups of three are just more memorable, and they're particularly effective when the final element is longer than the previous two, as in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or when the last element is different. It's also useful in persuasion because people want things in threes. Also consider the rise in intensity. It gives the feeling of moving towards something. The Wizard of Oz said, "You are talking to a man who has laughed in the face of death, sneered at doom, and chuckled at catastrophe." Another thing you might want to use are questions. Questions grab attention and gain our interest. We are programmed to seek answers. If you raise a question in your essay, your reader is going to try to answer that question. The reader might also be more receptive to getting an answer if they don't already have an answer to that question. Questions are also a good way to direct the reader by asking questions that you are going to answer. It tells the reader what questions they should be asking, and then it provides them an answer. So it can be useful to start a paragraph or start your essay by posing a question. Rhetorical questions are questions that don't have an answer. They can make the reader really think. What would the world be like without rhetoric? Rhetorical question. And hypophora is when you ask a question and then immediately give the answer. Is it good to use hypophora? Yes it is. Another example. It's instant gratification and can also be useful to guide your reader. So the goal of persuasive writing is to convince your reader that your opinion is correct. Today we learned about the three main modes of persuasion: ethos, logos, and pathos. We also learned a few rhetorical devices, including anecdotes, metaphors, similes, repetition, the rule of three, questions, rhetorical questions, and hypophora. These are just a couple useful tools to write more persuasively. So in this week's assignment, I want to know what makes a good teacher great. I want you to think of three qualities that you think are important that make someone a great, an awesome teacher. Tell me, what are the most important factors that make a good teacher into a great teacher? In your essay, try to include an anecdote, and you can use experiences from your teaching career. You can use experiences as a student. You can think of who was your favorite teacher, what did they do that made you appreciate them. I'd also like for you to use a metaphor, simile, or personification. Try to use some form of repetition and also pose a question. Well, that's all for this video. I look forward to reading your essays. Bye.